Why the A-10 Thunderbolt is suited for the Strait of Hormuz. While the U.S. Air Force has been trying to retire the aging A-10 for years to free up budget for fifth-generation stealth fighters like the F-35. However, the unique geography and asymmetric threats of the Strait of Hormuz have made the warthog temporarily indispensable. They fly low and can slow down the flight speed. Modern jets often fly too fast and high to effectively track small, agile boats swarming in a tight littoral coastal environment. The A-10 is built to fly close to the surface, allowing pilots to visually identify and engage small, erratic targets. One of the main advantages is that it also has massive loiter time. The A-10 can circle above the strait for hours. This persistent overwatch allows them to wait patiently for IRGC boats to emerge from hidden coastal inlets before striking. As we also know, the strait is heavily defended by man-portable air defense systems and small arms fire. To counter small firearms, the A-10's titanium bathtub cockpit armor and redundant flight systems allow it to absorb heavy anti-aircraft fire and keep flying, a risk the military is less willing to take with the F-35 $100 million stealth fighter jet. But the A-10s are not operating alone. They are currently acting as part of a layered tactical network, working directly alongside Apache attack helicopters, which are also hunting boats and intercepting one-way attack drones in the Strait of Hormuz. So, why exactly is the military keeping the A-10 in the fight? It all comes down to the rugged engineering behind its airframe. But to see why this plane refuses to die, we first have to crack it open and understand how it actually works. The A-10 is a ground attack aircraft primarily constructed from aluminum alloys. Its airframe consists of multiple independent beams that run along the length of the fuselage and wings, providing exceptional structural integrity. Since these aircraft operate at very low altitudes to support ground troops, they often face intense enemy fire. To withstand such conditions, the A-10 is designed with a rugged airframe capable of absorbing significant battle damage. It features extensive armor protection around the cockpit, and the glass is also bulletproof and other critical components, making it exceptionally durable for close air support missions. In fact, the A-10's cockpit is encased in titanium armor, also called the bathtub, weighing approximately 1,200 pounds, which translates 540 kilograms, allowing it to withstand heavy impacts and continue flying even in hostile environments. Let's start from the front. This aircraft, along with its entire frame, was built specifically to accommodate this massive gun. Because of that, the landing gear had to be pushed to the sides. To give you an idea of its scale, let's compare it to a person. You can see just how huge it is. From this top angle, you'll notice that the gun is slightly off-center. This is named as the GAU-8 Avenger, a 30mm cannon, and it's actually angled downward by a few degrees. The GAU-8 Avenger uses a 7-barrel Gatling design where barrels rotate around a central axis. Each barrel fires sequentially, allowing rapid cooling between shots and reducing wear. The rotation is powered by dual hydraulic motors producing 77 horsepower, which spin the barrels at high speeds, achieving a rate of fire of 3,900 rounds per minute, down from an initial 4,200 revolutions per minute to extend barrel life. It also employs a double-ended, linkless feed system that cycles spent casings back into the drum magazine instead of ejecting them. This prevents imbalances in the aircraft's center of gravity and avoids debris ingestion by engines. The drum holds up to 1,174 rounds, typically loaded with 1,150, and requires a specialized reloading, a process that can take hours due to the system's complexity. The gun generates 10,045 kilonewton of recoil, more than one of the A-10's TF-34 engines, which produces 9,065 pounds each. To counteract this, the gun is mounted off-center, slightly to the port side. This design balances recoil forces, preventing pitch or yaw deviations during firing. The reason for the high recoil is because of the size of these rounds. For reference, this is a standard bullet. Right next to it is a 50 caliber round. Finally, this is the massive 30mm bullet used in the GAU-8 Avenger. To put things into perspective, let's compare it to the size of a human hand, and it is enormous. To help you understand better, this is a cross-section of an armor-piercing incendiary round made with a depleted uranium penetrator. Just below that is the jacket, followed by a tracer round, propellant charge, and finally the electric primer. When fired, it can pass through 38mm of steel when fired from a range of 1,000 meters. Moving back to the front, the two objects positioned just above the gun and the forward radar warning receiver. To create a 360-degree protection, these are also fitted on the wings on each side and finally on the tip of the tail. They are essential for a ground attack jet, as heat-seeking missiles always pose a potential threat. When a target is locked by radar and illuminated by a continuous wave or pulse Doppler signal, used for missiles with a semi-active radar seeker, these radar warning receivers pick it up. The HUD and display unit alert the pilot and activate countermeasures such as flares to confuse incoming missiles, helping to prevent a fatal crash. Even for civilians, there are countless bad actors targeting our computers, which is why we need a defense mechanism. Just like the A10 Thunderbolt's multi-targeting radar. Similarly, this VPN identifies and blocks suspicious email with the harmful download link. In this case, it will alert you immediately. Beyond that, it includes a robust antivirus software to shield your devices from viruses, malware, and tracking by ads, bots, or third parties. Finally, with Surfshark VPN, a single subscription covers not just you, but also your friends or even your entire city if you wanted. Go to our link surfshark.com/AITele. By buying through the promo link, you will get 4 extra months free, assured by a 30-day money-back guarantee. Step over here. If you open this hatch, you'll find a ladder, which makes this one of the few military jets with a built-in way to climb straight into the cockpit. Once inside, you'll notice everything's we clearly labeled with most of its parts, so feel free to take your time exploring before we dive into learning how to fire the GAU-8 Avenger cannon. Right in front of you are the center stick controls. The red button on top is the weapon release, and just below that, you'll find the trigger for the gun. To use the GAU-8, first flip the red gun safety switch to Gun Pack ARM. This activates both the cannon and the precision attack control system. Once you've locked onto a target, line up the upper dot of the reticle and hold down the first stage trigger on the target as shown here. When you're within a mile of the target, pull the trigger all the way. This unleashes a barrage of rounds powerful enough to take out tanks or lightly armored vehicles. Now that you've got the hang of the gun, let's talk about dropping bombs in case you come across one of these. For a bombing run, the pilot arcs into a semicircular dive toward the target but releases the bomb halfway through the maneuver. Thanks to physics, the bomb inherits the plane's forward speed at that moment, meaning it keeps flying ahead at the same velocity. With GPS guidance, it then glides precisely to its target. Inside the cockpit, let's take a look at the process of dropping gravity bombs. This is the velocity vector. It indicates the direction your aircraft is currently moving. Just below it is the computer-calculated impact point. The large line extending outward represents the projected weapon fall line. Here you can see the weapon selection symbology, and just below it, the selected weapon. In this case, the Mark 82 bomb. Now, the most important part to ensure accuracy, align the computer-calculated impact point with the velocity vector of the aircraft, while also making sure the projected weapon straight line with the target. This is what the impact fall line would look like. Keep in mind that these Mark 82 bombs are often equipped with a GPS guidance kit for greater precision. When the targeting symbology aligns over the target, the pilot presses the top release button on the control stick. From that moment, physics, gravity, and the GPS bomb kit take over, guiding it toward its mark. Let's consider this scenario, supporting ground troops who are under heavy fire and pinned down by armored tanks and heavy artillery bombardment. It all begins with reconnaissance or troops that needed fire support. They scan the battlefield, pinpointing enemy positions and relaying vital intelligence with precise coordinates. Once the plan is in place, the A-10s take off and head toward the target area. Flying at low altitudes, they use terrain features for cover, avoiding enemy radar detection. Throughout the approach, they maintain constant communication with ground units, receiving real-time updates and adjusting their tactics as needed. As they close in, the A-10s unleash their iconic GAU-8 Avenger cannons, tearing through armored vehicles and artillery positions. But they need to change their strategy against heavily armored targets. They can use guided munitions or Hellfire missiles for moving targets, delivering devastating precision against enemy tanks. Smoke rises from the battlefield as the Thunderbolts rain down their firepower. But their mission doesn't end with the initial strike. The A-10s remain on station, providing critical close air support. As ground troops push forward, the pilots stay ready to respond instantly to enemy resistance and clear the path ahead. The A-10's engines are mounted high on the fuselage, a design choice that helps reduce the risk of damage from foreign object when flying in partially damaged airports. This is how it works. The fan rotor draws in ambient air, which undergoes powerful compression in both the low pressure and high pressure compressors. Subsequently, the air enters the combustor, where fuel injection occurs. This process generates a continuous combustion of fuel and air, reaching temperatures about 1000 degrees Celsius. The resultant heat causes the gas to expand, leading it to escape from the combustor with high energy, flowing through both the high and low pressure turbines. As a consequence, the turbine blades rotate. The energy liberated by this process drives both the compressor and the fan. Finally, the remaining exhaust gases exit through the nozzle, generating thrust. Unlike traditional jet engines, the TF34G100 produces relatively cooler and slower moving exhaust, reducing its heat signature and making the A10 harder to detect with infrared sensors. All the power generated by the engine needs fuel, and they comes from these 4 compartmentalized self-sealing tanks. Here you'll find the forward fuel tank 1 and the rear fuel tank number 2. Moving to the sides, you'll see 2 additional wing fuel tanks. Opening this lid reveals the single-point refueling section. Through this refueling point, you can pump in up to 11,000 pounds of aircraft fuel. To put that into perspective, that's enough to fill about 20 school buses, assuming they use the same fuel type and each has an 80-gallon tank. These are the flaps on the A10. When extended, they increase the wing's surface area and curvature, allowing the aircraft to maintain controlled flight during takeoff, landing, and slow-speed maneuvers. Here are the slats. These help manage airflow over the wings, especially at high angles of attack, ensuring the aircraft remains stable and controllable even during sharp turns or aggressive maneuvers. The rudder mounted on the vertical stabilizer at the tail is the A-10's primary means of controlling yaw, the side-to-side movement of the aircraft's nose. Finally, the air brakes are one of the A-10's most distinctive features. These large panels extend from the fuselage just behind the wings, creating significant drag. They allow the A-10 to transition from high-speed flight to low-speed maneuvering without compromising stability, making them an indispensable tool for close air support missions. In case the military needs you, let's go over how to start this plane. First, set the inverter to standby, then turn on the battery power. Next, start the APU or auxiliary power unit. Wait for the APU gauge to reach 100%. Now start the left engine by setting the throttle to the idle position. Once the left engine is running smoothly, start the right engine. After both engines are up and running, turn off the APU. Finally, set all displays to either day or night mode depending on your needs. And just like that, full throttle and raising the control unit and you're ready to go. We make original videos from scratch and animated by humans, so please subscribe to not miss a beat.
You were literally with President Trump the day before the strikes happened. Can you explain to us what the reasoning and the rationale are for this war?
I said, look, I think we should not miss this moment. America will be much, much safer. I believe the Ayatollah, if he had had a nuclear weapon, the odds are unacceptably high that he would use it.
Why do you say that, Senator?
I don't want to experience a world where the Ayatollah has a warhead and his only problem is, how do I get this to America to detonate?
There is this growing concern about the relationship between Israel and America, and that many people feel that it is not to the benefit of the United States now.
You mentioned Tucker Carlson. I believe Tucker's the most dangerous demagogue in America. Tucker interviewed Fuentes and nodded when Fuentes said his mission was to defeat global Jewry. By the way, not Israel, Jews.
Do you think Cuba's next?
Trigonometry is proudly independent, and sponsors like Hillsdale College make that possible. Access their free library of world-class educational courses at hillsdale.edu/trigger. Senator, welcome to Trigonometry. Before we start the interview proper, it's always good to ask, particularly politicians, about their journey, how they came to be where they are, and also how your journey influenced and shaped your views.
Sure. My journey, I'm a Texan. Like the both of you, I'm the product of my family story. For me, my hero my whole life has been my dad. My father was born in Cuba and grew up in Cuba. And as a kid, when he was 14, he began fighting the Cuban Revolution and fighting actually alongside Fidel Castro. And he did not know that Castro was a communist. In fact, when I want to irritate my father, I will call him a communist guerrilla. And he gets angry. He goes, I was not a communist. I was never a communist. But as my dad describes it, he said the revolution were a bunch of kids like him. They were 14 and 15-year-old boys who didn't know any better. And Batista was a dictator. He was corrupt. He was in bed with the mafia. And so my father fought for several years in the revolution. And then when he was 17, they caught him. And they threw him in jail and they tortured him and beat him badly. And they let him go. And at that point, my grandfather, my abuelo, said, look, they know who you are. They're just going to kill you. And so my dad was a freshman at University of Havana at the time. And so he applied to 3 U.S. universities. He applied to University of Miami, LSU, and University of Texas, and UT let him in. So 1957, my father takes a ferry boat from Havana to Key West, and then takes a Greyhound bus from Key West all the way to Austin, Texas. Shows up in Austin, can't speak English, has $100 in his underwear, and gets a job washing dishes, making 50 cents an hour. And he worked full-time, he went to school full-time, and ended up earning a degree, going on to getting a job, starting a small business. Today, my dad's a pastor. Now, interestingly, my dad's younger sister, my tia Sonia, who just passed away a few weeks ago, and she was incredible. I called her my tia loca, my crazy aunt. She was still there after the revolution succeeded. And
Wow.
so she saw that, and sadly, this is a pattern a lot of Latin America has seen, that they went as bad as Batista was, Fidel Castro was worse. And so she saw him declare that he was a communist, begin seizing people's lands, begin executing dissidents. And so my tia Sonia fought in the counter-revolution against Castro. And she ended up being imprisoned and tortured by Castro's goons. And that pattern, so she and my dad fought on opposite sides. When I was a little kid, I used to sit at the feet of my dad and my tia Sonia, and I would hear stories about freedom fighters. And that inspired me. You know, I told that story at my tia Sonia's funeral just a few weeks ago, and I said, look, it's not often that somebody's entire life is inspired in significant part by his aunt. But my aunt and my dad were both freedom fighters, and if you asked me as a little kid, 5, 6, 7 years old, what do you want to do in life? I would have said I want to fight for freedom. It's all I've ever wanted to do. And so now in the Senate, I have the incredible privilege of actually getting to do that. And you know, I think of the Senate as almost like the modern day Coliseum, where you strap on your armor and you go fight the barbarians. And so, and there's no shortage.
Senator, what do you know about communism that most Americans don't with your background?
Communism is the most evil, twisted, depraved ideology mankind has ever produced. It has resulted in more murder, more suffering, more torture, more poverty, more misery than any ideology. It is unequivocally evil. I hate communists, and I don't hide it. They are everywhere that darkness has touched. It has oppressed, and it is empowered. By the way, for the communists, look, Fidel Castro lived like a billionaire. Putin lives like he's a billionaire. I mean, it's very good to be an uncontrollable despot. It just sucks for everybody else. And so I think defeating communism is incredibly important. And communism is the antithesis of human liberty, of free enterprise, of individual freedom.
So, Senator, moving forward now to talk about the conflict in Iran, you were literally with President Trump the day before the strikes happened. Can you explain to us what the reasoning and the rationale are for this war?
Sure. Look, I urged the president to launch this attack. As you noted, I was with him pretty much the entire day on Friday before the attack launched on Saturday. And so we were on Air Force One. We were flying down to Texas to Corpus Christi at a big event planned in Corpus Christi. So I was on the plane with him. And then he asked me to hop in the Beast, the presidential limo, and it was just the two of us one-on-one. And pretty much the whole time he was asking me what I thought we should do on Iran. And I said, look, I think we should not miss this moment. I think the regime is weaker than it ever has been. And we have an opportunity. If we can collapse this regime, America will be much, much safer. There are very few things on planet Earth that would do more to improve American national security as much as seeing this regime collapse. And he asked me in the Beast, he said, well, look, do you think we should negotiate further? And I said, no. I said, I don't believe they're negotiating in good faith. They are liars. I think the Ayatollah just wants to delay and delay and delay while they rebuild. And I said, as far as I'm concerned, the only deal you should be willing to take is the same deal you offered Maduro. And Trump offered Maduro, if he wanted to leave the country, he could go into exile and he would be allowed to live out the rest of his days if he left and exited. And Maduro said no, and I suspect Maduro regrets saying no now. And I said, I could live with that deal for the Ayatollah, to give him and the mullahs the same choice. You can leave and allow a new regime to come to power in Iran, or if you don't leave, the alternative is going to be a less than pleasant one. And so in terms of what are the objectives, I'll break it into two categories. Number one, what are the objectives the administration has stated? And number two, what I think the objective should be. So the administration has stated that the objective is to degrade the military so that they cannot strike out. And so we've seen in the 2.5 weeks that this military conflict has been ongoing, we've seen, number one, their air defenses essentially completely eliminated. We've seen their short and medium-range missiles all but completely eliminated as well. We've seen the missiles taken out. We've seen the missile launchers taken out. We've seen the manufacturing capacity for new missiles taken out. Same thing for drones. We've taken out the drones, the launching facilities, and the manufacturing. All of that has been taken out. We've also taken out almost the entirety of the Iranian Navy. The result has been that we have near complete air dominance over Iran. There's nothing Iran can do about it. And we have decapitated the regime. Obviously, the Ayatollah is gone. We've taken out many of the senior leaders in the regime. You keep having new leaders appointed. That's how the administration has described their objectives. And on the terms of those objectives, I think they've accomplished a lot. The administration has not articulated its objective as regime change. And look, there's an obvious reason for that, which is after the Iraq War, I think people are wary of the words regime change. Understandably, for good reason. The Iraq War, I think the Iraq War was a mistake, and I'm happy to talk about that and compare and contrast this to Iran. I, however, think our objective should be unequivocally collapsing this regime. And in my view, the decision to launch this attack was the most consequential decision President Trump has made in his second term. Iran has been at war with the United States for 47 years, since the Islamic Revolution, which began by seizing Americans and holding them hostage for 444 days. So that's how they started this journey. Iran, for the entirety of that time, has been the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. They provide over 90% of the funding to Hamas, to Hezbollah, to the Houthis. They've killed nearly 1,000 Americans over that time. The Ayatollah hired not one, but 2 squads of hitmen to try to murder President Trump. And I think an Iran that had a government that was not led by a radical Islamist who leads mobs chanting death to America, an Iran that had a government that was not actively trying to murder Americans, and by the way, succeeding, killing Americans year after year after year, that would be a much safer world for the United States and for our allies. And so I think that should be the objective.
Senator, but there's lots of, I agree with you on that. You know, personally, I think Francis and I both thought that the 12-day war was a sensible thing to do if you could get the nuclear material. It seems that that didn't quite happen based on some of the satellite imagery and the fact that the United States is attacking again. But you're right. And I think, you know, our conversations here in the United States with all kinds of people show this. The words regime change send shivers down a lot of spines, rightly so.
Understandably.
So what is the vision of how, because Iranian regime, terrible. I don't think there's anyone in the world who disagree with that. But there's one thing to get rid of them and another thing to replace them. What is the end goal here?
So I'm going to answer your question, but let me stop you when you said you don't think there's anyone in the world that would disagree with that.
Sure, there's some people in the world.
And by the way, there's some people who are not very far away from us. Most of the Senate Democrats, look, during the 4 years of Joe Biden, the Biden administration flowed over $100 billion to Iran, to keeping the regime in office. In a very real sense, the Biden administration was the most important funder for Iran. And Iran, in turn, was funding terrorists who were killing Americans, including the atrocities of October 7th. In a very real way, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris flowed the money to Iran that paid for the training of those death squads. And so at some point, look, I understand Senate Democrats like to say, oh, we don't like the Ayatollah. You know what? If you give someone $100 billion, you don't dislike him that much. Like at the end of the day, actions speak louder than words. And by the way, Barack Obama has written in his memoir how when the Green Revolution was happening during Obama's presidency, that he made a very deliberate decision. Don't stand with the protesters. Don't encourage the protesters. Instead, support the regime. And so that the Democrat Party as an ideological matter doesn't want to see the regime fall. And they're perfectly happy. They've been happy to flow billions of dollars to them. Now, how do we get this regime to collapse? I think what we're doing right now is very effective. A combination of military pressure, removing their ability to wage war. What I have called for, I do not know if we are doing it, is arming the protesters. And I'll give you a story as to why. 30 plus years ago when Tiananmen Square happened, I remember at the time, or right after Tiananmen Square, the NRA ran a full-page ad in 6 U.S. universities, newspapers. Ran it in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, LA Times, and USA Today. And the ad was just a giant picture of Tiananmen Square packed with people. And I still remember the words. The ad said, last week, over 1 million people rose up in protest in Tiananmen Square. Imagine what would have happened if they had had guns.
Senator, but isn't that exactly the problem here? Because the people who would have risen up and who may have used those guns are dead because they were all slaughtered by the regime. And now you're bombing the regime in order to get people to rise up who are no longer there. New year, new systems, right? This is the time when we all look at the messier parts of our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest and easiest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Q-U-O, the smarter way to run your business communications. A missed call is money out of the door. Quo helps you and your team share one business number, reply faster, and stay on top of every customer conversation, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. Your entire team can handle calls and texts from one shared number with a full conversation thread visible to everyone. Quo works wherever you are. Right from an app on your phone or computer, it lets you keep your existing number and makes it easy to add teammates or new numbers as your business grows. And Quo isn't just a phone system. Quo's AI automatically logs calls, generates summaries, and highlights next steps so nothing gets lost. It can even respond after hours, keeping your business responsive when you're offline. Make this the year when no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/trig. That's QUO.com/TRIG. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers.
Some are, and look, we don't have a precise measure on how many people the regime murdered. Anywhere, the estimates range from 10,000 to 40,000.
Right.
It's certainly clear that they've killed many, but you've got a nation of 92 million people. And look, I remember that ad about Tiananmen Square because I sat there and thought, you know what? 1 million people rising up who are armed, that's not a protest anymore. That's a revolution. And the same would be true. Look, part of why the regime was able to murder 10 to 40,000 people is you had soldiers with machine guns and you had people on the other side with rocks. That doesn't work when you have that kind of imbalance. When both sides can defend themselves, you get a very different dynamic. Let's go for a moment to why this is different from Iraq. Because I want to be very clear. I think Iraq was a serious mistake. And if you rewind, go back to the 2016 presidential election in the United States. So in that election, we had 17 Republicans run. If you set aside Rand Paul, whose foreign policy views are kind of on one fringe, if you set Rand aside, of the 16 remaining candidates, there were 2 and only 2 who opposed the Iraq War. Me and Donald Trump. Everyone else thought the Iraq War was a good idea and defended it. Now, why did I oppose the Iraq War? Because I think it made America less safe. What I have argued for is the central touchstone for every foreign policy decision, every military decision should be protecting the vital national security of the United States of America. Saddam Hussein was a bad man. He was a monster. He was a tyrant. He was murdering his own people. But he was also killing terrorists. We came in and we toppled Saddam Hussein, and the terrorists took over and began killing Americans. That didn't make us safer. It made us less safe. By the way, we did the exact same thing in Libya. Gaddafi, again, a terrible man. America came in and toppled him. He was killing terrorists. Instead, the terrorists took over. They began killing Americans. That was a material harm to our national security. Why is Iran different? Iran is different because the Iranians are murdering Americans. They are waging war with us, whether the Democrats want to acknowledge it or not. And so removing from power Islamists who are actively trying to kill Americans makes us safer. Now, Iraq was compounded because the mission became nation building, because the mission became put hundreds of thousands of boots on the ground for years at a time. And a lot of folks in the Republican Party thought, you know, our mission is to promote democracy. Democracy is wonderful, and we are the global police who will promote democracy across the globe. I think that's completely misguided. I think democracy is great. I think we should advocate democracy. The bully pulpit, I am all for advocating democracy, but I'm not willing to send our sons and daughters to die to try to turn countries in the Middle East into Switzerland. I think that was a big mistake.
So what is the administration trying to turn Iran into? This is the question that I think that I haven't heard a persuasive answer from anybody, not just you.
Well, look, I think they haven't articulated it because they are wary of using the words regime change. So that's why
they have said regime change. What they haven't said is what the next bit is.
Look, if you listen to Pete Hegseth, if you listen to Marco Rubio, they're not embracing regime change. They're saying we want to degrade the drones and the missiles. They're talking about the specific and discrete military objectives, which are meaningful. What I'm saying unapologetically is I want a government that is not an Islamist government that is trying to kill us.
I want it too, Senator, but how is that going to happen?
Okay.
Because if you keep killing them, they seem to get less moderate, not more, from what I'm observing.
Look, at some point, this regime stays in power through brute force. They stay in power through military might. As you remove their ability to repress the people, at some point it's up to the people of Iran to govern themselves. But taking out the people who are the Islamist dictators removes them from the equation. And then, look, I am largely agnostic as to who the people of Iran choose. There are different people that are competing. And as far as I'm concerned, as long as it's not someone trying to kill us, my focus is protect Americans. And so if they want, look, there are different discussions. If they have a democratically elected leader, there's discussions about the Shah's son as an interim leader. I'm ambivalent on that. That's their choice. What I'm not ambivalent on is having a leader in place and a government in place that is not waging war against us. And I think the president's job is to be commander-in-chief, focused on keeping Americans safe, protecting American lives. I think that's what we're doing.
And what's your assessment on the time frame that's required for this? Because I was just looking before we started, the Kalshi odds of the Republicans holding the Senate at the midterms have gone from 82% 3 months ago to it's now 50-50. And it's narrowed very much since this conflict has started. So given that there may well be, the Republican Party is very much behind this war, but there may well be a domestic price to pay, particularly the longer this goes.
Yeah, look, I'll confess, I am skeptical of things like prediction markets for elections. I think there's some areas where prediction markets can be quite accurate. In my experience, prediction markets reflect the conventional wisdom at the time. So to give you an example, the prediction markets in the 2016 presidential election at this point said Jeb Bush was the runaway favorite and he was going to win. And so that was the conventional wisdom at the time, and that's where the prediction market was. I don't disagree with the proposition that politically, where we are right now is a challenging position for Republicans. That if the election were held today, there would be a very good chance we would lose the House and we could lose the Senate as well. Now, obviously, I hope that doesn't happen, and we do have 7 months until Election Day, so we've got time. And I think we've got a remarkable record of success, much of which has not been communicated to the voters. And so I think we've got a real record to campaign on. And I don't believe that what is happening in Iran will be front and center in November. I don't think that this will extend. If it extends that long, we've done something wildly wrong. I don't believe it will. I think the president said at the beginning this is going to be a matter of several weeks. This is not, I don't think the president is envisioning anything that extends multiple months, much less multiple years. I think this will prove a very different military involvement than Iraq did.
Senator, so you've got Cuban heritage, I've got Venezuelan heritage, and Constantine has Russian heritage. We know how autocratic regimes work.
Yeah.
We know that it's not just the people at the top, but they have the tentacles which they use to control people,
Sure.
in particular the IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard, numbering roughly around 200,000 highly trained soldiers, many of whom are fanatical. They are Islamists. How are you going to deal with them? Because they are the ones keeping essentially the Iranian people let's be honest, they're the ones keeping them in control.
Sure. And that's where this military campaign, I think, is making a difference, because you're taking out significant numbers of the IRGC as well. You're weakening the apparatus the regime has to oppress the people. And look, weakening the regime, we're at an interesting moment in time, because there is a very real possibility in the next 6 months, we could see new governments in Iran, Venezuela, and Cuba. And if we end up with governments in those 3 countries that want to be friends with America rather than are enemies with America, that would be the biggest geopolitical shift since the fall of the Berlin Wall. Now let me be clear. There are 1,000 ways that can go wrong. I'm not being Pollyannish and saying, oh, everything's wonderful. But on any objective level, the regimes there are weaker than they have been in our lifetimes. That is a moment of enormous opportunity. And so, look, at some level, it's going to be up to the people of Iran if they want a new government to step up and insist on that. I do think the president's putting pressure, weakening the regime and weakening the oppressive power of the regime makes them more vulnerable. And that, at the end of the day, I think that increases the safety of Americans.
And the other challenge that you're facing is the Strait of Hormuz at the moment, because when you look at the natural resources going through there, the petroleum, the liquid natural gas, the fact that it's
fertilizer,
helium, the fact that it's been shut and it's been closed, and let's be honest, that is Iran's main trump card. That is a very real issue, not just for America, but for the globe in general.
Unquestionably, although I will note the Europeans, who are more impacted by the Strait of Hormuz closing than America is, the Europeans have said, well, gosh, we don't like it, but we're not willing to do much about it.
I identify as Venezuelan.
I'm just saying.
That sounds very on brand for Europe at the moment, we say as Europeans, unfortunately.
Look, the Strait of Hormuz is no doubt a critical choke point. And Iran, I think part of the reason that we're seeing them go after the Strait is because I think they're in desperate straits, that they are so weakened they don't have very many options left. And look, we've seen, for example, a short-term energy price spike. Now listen, if energy keeps soaring and if you end up with gas prices much higher, you asked politically about the election. High gas prices historically have not been good for elections. People are pissed. Now, I don't believe that'll happen in the long term. I think we're seeing a short-term spike. Anytime you have military conflict in the Middle East, you predictably have a spike in the price of oil and the price of gasoline. If we can see a stable regime in Iran that is not waging war with us, and if the Iranian energy can come to the global market free of sanctions and free of conflict, I think long-term that has a significant downward pressure on the price of oil and the price of gasoline. And I also would point out that even with the spike we've seen, the price of gasoline is still significantly lower today than it was under Joe Biden. And so we saw under the Trump administration and Republican Congress, the price of gasoline basically cut in half. And then we've seen about half of that go back up again during this conflict. I think the conflict will be short-lived, and I think you'll see prices fall when that happens.
Going into this year, I told myself I was finally going to stop guessing about my health. Like most people, I want more energy, better focus, and to be still strong and sharp years from now. But every time I've gone to the doctor, I walk out with basically nothing. Everything's fine. Drink more water, sleep a bit more. No real insight, no plan, just vibes. That's why Superpower stood out to me. Superpower makes it simple to actually understand what's going on inside your body. You do one blood draw either at home or in a nearby lab, and they analyze over 100 biomarkers. That's heart health, hormones, metabolism, vitamins, minerals, and even environmental toxins. What I love is that you don't just get numbers, you get a personalized action plan, supplements, nutrition guidance, lifestyle changes, and even your true biological age that you can track over time. Price-wise, this is a no-brainer compared to the alternatives. Superpower used to cost $499. Right now it's $199, while other testing services charge $500, $1,000, sometimes more, for similar, often inferior information. Your blueprint activated with Superpower. Superpower is just $199, and for a limited time, you can get an additional $20 off with our code TRIGGER. Head to superpower.com and use code TRIGGER at checkout for $20 off your membership. After you sign up, they'll ask you how you heard about them, so make sure to mention trigonometry to support the show. Once again, head to superpower.com and use our code TRIGGER at checkout.
But we're looking at, for instance, a significant gas field in Qatar being bombed.
Yes.
And it's now being shut down. People within Qatar are saying it's going to take 3 to 5 years for it to be up and running and to be fully functional. And that is responsible for 15% of the world's natural gas. And you're going, this is unsustainable, surely.
Well, look, that was bombed by the Iranians, and
Yes.
it is an amazing statement that Iran, when this military conflict started, began firing missiles at practically every one of its neighbors. And ironically, the Arab world is more united behind this military conflict than Europe is, and I think it's because they understand the threat of their neighbor. And listen, when the Ayatollah says death to America, I believe him. I don't think those were empty words. One of the reasons why I have been leading the fight to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon is I believe the Ayatollah, if he had had a nuclear weapon, the odds are unacceptably high that he would use it. And let's...
Why do you say that, Senator?
Because he was a theocratic zealot who embraced a death cult that celebrates suicide. So let's compare and contrast Iran to North Korea. You know, if you go back, let's go back to the Bill Clinton administration. Bill Clinton administration was negotiating with Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un's dad, and cut a deal. And they said, okay, if you don't develop nuclear weapons, we will give you billions of dollars. And Kim Jong-il said, great deal, happy to do it. Well, what happened? They took the billions of dollars, they turned around and developed nuclear weapons, and now North Korea has nuclear weapons. And they regularly threaten to use them. They threaten to use them on their neighbors in Asia. They threaten to use them on the United States. North Korea claims they have missiles that can go. In fact, Austin, Texas has been one of the targets they have identified as a nuclear target. Now, look, Kim Jong-un is narcissistic and unstable and a megalomaniac. But perhaps some modicum of deterrence is possible. Because the one thing Kim Jong-un understands is if he were, God forbid, to use a nuclear weapon, his regime would end that day. The response would be devastating, and he wants to stay in power. It would have been a much better world if he didn't have nuclear weapons, but there's at least some modicum one can hope of deterrence. What is qualitatively different when religion comes into it, when a theocratic zealot comes into it, is that ordinary cost-benefit analysis doesn't work nearly as well. So, look, if the Ayatollah had a nuclear weapon, I think there is some real chance, and I don't know what the possibility is, but it's real, that he would detonate that weapon in Tel Aviv or New York or Los Angeles. Now, if he did that, the result would be an overwhelming military response, and a response that predictably would take the lives of many Iranians if he detonated a nuclear weapon. Here's the problem. I think the Ayatollah might have been just fine with that. If he got to kill lots of Jews or he got to kill lots of Americans, I think with religious zealotry, that might be an acceptable trade-off to him. And so my view was, as a matter of national security, we should do everything necessary to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. And I will say, one of the additional justifications the administration has used for this military conflict is that Iran was rapidly building up its short and medium-term missile stockpile, building over 100 missiles a month, and they were building them up and building them up. And the administration was concerned that they would get such an overwhelming stockpile of missiles that it would be extremely expensive in terms of loss of lives to engage in military conflict with Iran, and they would do that essentially as a shield to then be able to develop nuclear weapons. That they were developing these short and medium-term missiles to be able to inflict massive pain and loss of life on all of their neighbors. And so the administration said, we don't want to be sitting here a year from now where their stockpile and their drones are so massive that to go in and try to take out their nuclear facilities risks a massive loss of life. I think that is a reasonable justification as well. But all of this is keyed on, are you protecting America? Are you keeping Americans safe?
I am completely with you on the fact that Iran should not be allowed to get nuclear weapons. I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that they were ever likely to be able to hit Los Angeles or New York. Tel Aviv, maybe.
Tel Aviv, maybe, although, look, there's more than one ways to hit a target. Do they have an ICBM that could cross the ocean? No. Although they had an ICBM program, they were trying to develop an ICBM, and I would point out to people all the time, the I in ICBM stands for intercontinental. You do not need an ICBM to hit Israel. They wanted an ICBM for one purpose, which was to carry a nuclear warhead to the United States. So they were trying to develop it. But I will point out beyond that, look, if you have a nuclear weapon, there's more than one way to deliver a warhead. And if they could find a way to get it on a ship or another cargo carrier, to put it in a container and put it in Manhattan, you don't have to deliver the warhead using a missile. And so I don't want to experience a world where the Ayatollah has a warhead and his only problem is, how do I get this to America to detonate?
And look, I appreciate that this question,
And I'll point out, London could be another target. I think he would have rather murdered Americans than the British, but London is certainly another target you could envision him striking.
We are little Satan.
No, I think that's Israel. But nonetheless, I mean, I appreciate the president can't think in the terms that I'm about to describe, but nonetheless, is not a much more likely explanation of why Iran was seeking nuclear weapons is actually the reason that North Korea was seeking nuclear weapons, i.e. to deter aggression from Israel, from the United States, and to prevent the very things happening now. And the worry for some people is actually this conflict has created an incentive structure that will only accelerate the attempts to get nukes.
So I don't think that's right. And I will say, look, there's a reason the Ayatollah referred to Israel as the little Satan and America as the great Satan. As I said, when he would lead mobs chanting death to America, I believed him. I don't think it was empty rhetoric. I think he believed it with all of his heart. And his whole life, he had been carrying it out. He had been murdering Americans. So we knew it wasn't empty rhetoric. He murdered every American he could and every chance he could. And listen, there are some, if you look at the Biden administration, their approach, they dealt with every foreign conflict with weakness and appeasement. And those on the left think, well, that's how you avoid war. Well, it's amazing. When Joe Biden came into office, there was peace and prosperity across the globe. And we had two military conflicts break out simultaneously. Russia invaded Ukraine, and we had October 7th and the Gaza war that unfolded. And I think both of those were in a very direct way caused by Joe Biden's weakness, that our enemies, when Biden withdrew from Afghanistan in an absolute debacle of incompetence that, among other things, cost the lives of 13 American servicemen and women, I said at the time, I said, this has made the world much more dangerous. I said, the odds of Russia invading Ukraine have just increased tenfold, and the odds of China invading Taiwan have increased tenfold. And our enemies have looked to the Oval Office. They've taken the measure of the commander-in-chief, and they've concluded that he's weak and feckless. In contrast, Donald Trump, our enemies are terrified of him. And I think America is safer when our enemies are afraid of the commander-in-chief. Appeasement increases the chances of military conflict. I've joked, there's a reason nobody goes and studies and gets a degree from the Neville Chamberlain School of Foreign Affairs. It doesn't work. Appeasement encourages bullies and tyrants. And so you see, look, when Trump went into Venezuela and arrested Maduro and his wife, that had a profound impact. And it resulted in our enemies. I think it reduced the chance of conflict. Now, you said, well, couldn't Iran want nukes to avoid people attacking them? Look, if they weren't killing everyone, nobody would be attacking them. This is not a military. The United States is not an aggressor seeking conquest. We're not trying to conquer the land and make it an American territory. We're not an expansive regime. We're acting to stop people from killing Americans. That's a very different thing. And so the justification of the Ayatollah you suggested, well, I want to get the tools to kill a lot more Americans so I can keep killing the Americans I can now, that doesn't pass the smell test.
One of the other things that's become, we've traveled around the United States many, many times before, but we've been here for a couple of weeks now, talking to all sorts of people on camera and off. As you'll be aware, as we're recording this yesterday, a counterterrorism official resigned, Joe Kent.
Yep.
And he is saying, I thought there were a lot of baseless things about Israel that he said in the statement, but broadly speaking, he's actually saying something that many people are now openly saying, which is that Israel and the United States have different objectives in this conflict. And in fact, it is Israel's objectives that are being satisfied while Americans are not.
Look, I think that is silliness, and I actually think Israel had very little to do with why the United States is engaged in this military conflict. President Trump is acting to keep America safer. I can tell you when I talked with him about it, Israel didn't even come up. We talked about the Iranians killing Americans. Like, in my conversations with him, Israel was not even part of the conversation. It was simply This regime has tried to murder Trump twice, hired hitmen to murder Trump twice. He was not happy about that. He doesn't, understandably.
Sure.
And this was all about keeping Americans safe. That was his reasoning.
How do you square that, and forgive me for interrupting, but how do you square that with Secretary Rubio's statement, which he sort of walked back, but nonetheless, a lot of people felt that when he was talking about this, he basically, quote unquote, gave the game away when he said, well, Israel was about to attack, so we had to jump in there before we were attacked in response.
I can't tell you why he said that. You'd have to ask him why he said that.
One thing that doesn't get talked about enough is how
Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Of course, here's the meme of the day brought to you by FiveMind.com. I gotta tell you, this is one of my favorite things in life, and no, it's not chocolate pudding, it's not chocolate milk, it's not cake. No, it's none of that. It's not what you'd expect as a typical answer to that question. No, my favorite thing in life is watching idiotic social revolutionary leftoids getting slapped in the face with their own frickin' stupidity. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, is that not the greatest thing known to mankind? I'll tell you it is. And the beauty of this being my drug of sorts is that I'm always getting my fix, you know? With most addictions, it's kind of hard to keep up, but in this case, oh, I got a healthy dose pretty consistently. And today, honestly, it's a mega dose. It's a dose that will likely last months. I won't need a re-up for a while. No, I am satisfied, satiated for quite some time. I gotta show you guys this Joe Rogan clip, and of course, let's just talk about these overarching concepts, mostly related to young leftist stupidity. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Alright friends, so here's a video that popped up on my timeline, and I think actually it's important to preface that this is not a real Joe Rogan video. It's one of those trickster videos where they edit it to make it seem as if Joe Rogan's calling to put it up, and then they put an AI Joe Rogan voice on top of it. But nonetheless, it's a nice kind of overview of the topic. Just take a look.
Check this out. This is wonderful. Starbucks workers in Seattle are colliding with harsh economic reality as repeated strikes and escalating demands trigger store closures instead of concessions. Baristas, organized under Workers United, walked out demanding higher wages, increased staffing, and expanded benefits, pushing for raises as high as 64% immediately and 77% over 3 years. But as sales declined and pressure mounted, Starbucks responded with a sweeping restructuring plan under CEO Brian Niccol, shutting down multiple unionized locations and cutting corporate staff. Several Seattle stores, including high-profile Reserve locations, closed despite protests, with the company citing poor financial performance rather than union activity. Workers, many unable to sustain unpaid strikes, returned to jobs only to find their stores permanently shuttered, with no transfer options offered.
Oh, I am unironically laughing behind the microphone. I'm struggling to get this segment going because it's just too damn good, or probably a better way to describe it, it's just too poetic. And you know, I gotta tell you, it gets a little bit old in this industry, being right all the time. I'm not saying that out of ego. I'm one of the few political commentator who doesn't lead with ego. I never pretend as if I'm the most educated, most intelligent mind of all time, who knows absolutely everything about everything, and every opinion that I state is the gospel truth. No, I'm very much just a normal dude. I get things wrong, I try my best, but time and time again, I'm just proven right. I mean, maybe I should grow my ego a little bit. Of course not, because honestly, it's less to do with my intellectual ability and more to do with just common frickin' sense. You know, it's like I always say, you got all these big brain leftoid economists, all these big brain Democrats and leftists who stayed in school for 20 years. They've got 7 different PhDs, $7 billion in student debt. They're the smartest people ever. And time again, my mechanic, the guy who does general construction contracting work for me, time and time again, tends to have a much better track record than all the big brain supposed experts. And this is especially more true true when it comes to these young propagandized kids, these far-left socialist revolutionaries. You want to appear like the smartest person on the planet, then whatever the green-haired septum ring people are saying, just adopt the opposite opinion. It's kind of like the inverse Kramer index or whatever you call it. Let's call this the inverse gender non-conforming person index, and you're going to have a pretty stellar track record. You're going to be right about a whole lot of things. You'll be really feeling yourself. And this is exactly one of those cases. And really, I think it all comes down to common sense, but also humility. You know, I think a lot of the times people over-attribute intelligence as if intelligence is the most important factor to analyzing daily events, the news cycle, economics, yada yada, whatever it is. But in this particular case, and in many cases with economics, or the conversation between socialism, capitalism, what it really comes down to is humility. Are you an entitled brat or not? And that's really the problem with these young leftoids. You know, you could have 140 Mensa frickin' IQ, Ivy League degree, an absolute big brain genius. You're really good at solving math equations. But if you don't have humility, you're gonna get so many things wrong. And so many of these young leftists, they lack humility. They believe they're entitled to something. And that's exactly what this is. These Starbucks employees, they believed as if they were entitled to more, to the extent that they thought they could blackmail the company into essentially doing their bidding. And instead, what did they get? A fast track to the unemployment line. And it's really not surprising why. You don't get to dictate your worth in the job market by throwing a frickin' tantrum. I deserve this, because... No, everything in life is earned. And if you don't like the current situation that you're in, well then the proper response is to develop skills that are in high demand and then to work your butt off. But no, what these people want is to extort a higher standard of living. Well, my friends, that is not the way the world works. And actually, speaking of these entitled far-left socialists, I thought I'd play this clip. This is a viral moment from Caleb Hammer's Financial Audit. I think it kind of speaks to the general far-left young socialist archetype that I'm referencing here.
We just don't really get political like
You're
that.
a year in.
I
think both
seen
sides
it.
are evil for politics. Like, no matter what.
That's true. I'm honestly kind of with him on that point. Like, it's all just bad. Like, I don't...
Extremism is bad, but even
It's
still.
all just bad.
Huh?
It's all just bad. Like, I agree that, like, the three-letter
Some have
agencies
good
aren't
intentions.
great. I don't think the government really is out to help the common man. I think it's out to help billionaires get richer. Like, I agree
Hey,
with
we
him
have the
to
most
that.
progressive income tax system in the entire Western world, to be clear. Federal.
Okay, why is it not
be better.
helping me? Why has the system not helped anybody I know?
System.
Why is
Go
the
get a better
system-
job. That's your choice to get the education you wanted. What did you get? What was your degree?
I got an associate's in marketing.
And that's the system's fault that you decided to get an associate's in marketing? That's an interesting
mean-
choice. You have a little bit of agency. I'll agree there's some interesting things that, like, segregation stuff, not good. Government system, bad, not good. You're in a position where you can pretty much do anything and everything. You have agency. I don't want to hear the system doesn't help you. Yes, in our capitalism where our stock market is the best in the world, people get very wealthy with their unrealized gains. That is true in the ownership of companies that they start or invest in. That is very true. But also, the median American has more disposable income than any other Western country. That means after all the necessary expenses, essentially healthcare, all that good stuff, okay? Disposable income, you got it all. The system didn't prevent you from getting a bachelor degree. The system didn't tell you you have to go work in card games. System help you? What do you mean? You don't contribute. You don't contribute. If we're just being honest, system, if we're just being honest, you do not contribute to the
At
tax.
least I pay my taxes.
No, that's what I was saying. You don't contribute to the tax system in this country.
No.
You're part of the lower 50%, which is not a bad thing. That's not a shameful thing. But the lower 50% that contribute less than 1% of all net federal income taxes in the country. 50% contribute less than 1. We have the most progressive income tax system. How do all the European countries pay for all the good stuff? VAT taxes, sales taxes, natural sales taxes. That's a flat tax. That hurts people like you. Okay? That's how they pay for the good stuff. Federal income tax, we have the most progressive Western income tax. Okay? So system not helping you, we barely ask for you to do anything. You pay such a minuscule percentage, and what degree you decided to get was on you. You're going to make me sound like the most right winger in the world talking about this, but you're just so beyond victim mindseted in this. When I heard the system, why did the system help me?
I don't think
that's just the most backwards thoughts.
I'm not blaming
You just
the
asked
government.
why wasn't the system helping me?
Not me specifically. Why are they
said
not
that.
helping anybody?
What do you mean not helping anyone? 50% of our literal federal expenditures in this country go to social programs. 50%.
Okay, let's say
50%. Not helping anyone? 50%.
You see it every single time, right? It's nothing but an entitled victim mindset. And the funniest part is that it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, you've got these young individuals who are unhappy with their current standard of living, their purchasing power, their ability to get ahead. And instead of putting their heads down, working hard, instead of smacking the anvil, going through the damn crucible, they want it handed to them. Give it to me. The federal government should give me what I want. And the irony there is, the more you grow government, the more burdensome or progressive that the tax structure becomes, the worse off these people become. It's counterintuitive. The answer is economic freedom and hard work, not unions, not big government. Well, we need more social programs. Yeah, that's exactly what we need. Healthcare is expensive. The solution is more government. What does that lead to? Somali daycare and hospice fraud? Medicaid and Medicare fraud? Bureaucratic bloat? Unaffordable trash socialist style healthcare? Give me a frickin' break. The solution is always more freedom, less government, more competition. You know, healthcare would be a whole lot cheaper if it wasn't just a few insurance companies and healthcare providers basically rigging the system, paying off politicians, and artificially crafting endless growth. No, the solution is less government, putting the power back in the hands of the people. It's like a downward spiral, self-fulfilling prophecy. A bunch of useless, lazy people with no skills, people who don't want to get their hands dirty, people who don't want to go through the grind of busting their frickin' tail off. No, they want everything handed to them. They'd rather have a scapegoat, a cop-out. The problem is the evil billionaires. Now, the evil billionaires must succumb to our demands, our intimidation, our blackmail, and give us what we want. Well, that leads to two things. In the corporate world, that leads to failed attempts to unionize and getting laid off. And in a governmental sense, it leads to punitive tax measures punishing productivity in the pursuit of success and a lower standard of living for all. The pursuit from these young leftoids is that everybody should have everything, but their ideology time and time again leads to everybody having nothing. And yet they just can't see it. They're blinded by their delusions of grandeur, as if they know best. Your green-haired 20-something-year-olds working at Starbucks because frankly, probably your parents failed you and had you pursue a useless career or non-existent career, and now you want to get bailed out of your situation. But what you should do is develop a little bit of humility, accept your own failed decision-making skills. You put yourself in that situation. You didn't work hard enough. You didn't develop skills that are relevant in the workplace, and so now you're a basic laborer, and you have nobody to blame but yourself. You're not entitled to magical pay raises. And if you have an issue with affordability, the problem is not billionaires who are creating wealth and creating jobs. No, the problem is Washington rigging the game. The problem is inflation, mass migration, putting downward pressure on your wages, illegal migrants, illegally competing for those jobs, and again, pushing down your wages, burdensome regulations, making housing more expensive. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. The solution's staring these people straight in the face, and yet they just can't see it. No, it's always my billionaires. The answer to everything is unionization, but that, my friends, is a path paved to hell. We need to bring back common sense thinking. We need to bring back personal accountability, hard work, fulfilling one's own destiny, and getting government and collective bargaining the hell out of the way. Anyways, that's pretty much what I got for you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.
Trump is threatening Iran on a level we've never seen before. We are kicking this up to quite literally the final gambit. We are officially in the end game. It cannot go anywhere past this. Netanyahu released a message. A lot of people are pretty freaked out about it. Hassan Piker, they are literally protesting against him in Cuba because he is shilling for the communist regime there. The Democrats have defunded the Department of Homeland Security, and there was another Islamic terror attack. 26 people stabbed, one person seemingly going to die. The normies are waking up, the feminazis are finding out, and quite literally, if you want to keep up to date with all the things, you should definitely subscribe. I cover all the things in the way they need to be covered. Too many people don't want to be edgy, don't want to be controversial, don't want to get canceled, don't want to be Islamophobic. They don't want to read too deep into it. They just want to read the headlines. Well, this guy, consistently correct, by the way, ever since the Iran war started, doesn't actually care. Actually, my superpower against people trying to cancel me for being racist and Islamophobic is actually not caring if you call me racist or Islamophobic. It's honestly diabolical. It seems simple, but you shut down the entire worldview when you're just like, no, actually, I don't give a shit about what you call me. But you know who gives a lot of shits right now? Iran. Donald Trump tweeted, if Iran doesn't fully open without threat, oh my god, the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours from this exact point in time, the United States of America will hit and obliterate their various power plants, starting with the biggest one first. Oh my god. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. People don't actually recognize the magnitude of this tweet. First of all, Presidente Donald Trump doesn't bluff a lot, all right? Now, a lot of people say he's bluffing, and he might be, but he doesn't bluff a lot. He told the protesters in Iran, rise up and I'll help you. They rose up, and, well, he helped them. He said Iran will not have a nuclear weapon, and, well, I don't know if you're keeping up to date with the news. Iran does not have a nuclear weapon, or a navy, or an air force, or a leader. Those bastards got whipped so fucking hard, it's diabolical. Trump straight up clearing the leaderboards on the Ayatollah to Lucifer pipeline speedrun. It's insane. Any percent Iran supreme leader to 72 virgins pipeline is just fucking insane. But the reality is, this escalates the war to a whole new place. Until now, we were striking military targets. This is, well, some people call it a war crime. I actually call that fake and gay. All right, no one cares about war crimes. Iran's been doing war crimes since the war started. They're attacking their neighbors unprovoked. They're attacking energy sources, desalination plants. They're attacking whatever they fucking can. They're targeting civilians. They're using cluster munitions to quite literally maximize civilian damage, which is a war crime. But no one actually gives a shit about Iranian war crimes. So therefore, I don't actually believe in playing into this whole game where we have to abide by our principles, but you don't have to abide by our principles. Asymmetric warfare is gay, all right? And the people that trick you into thinking that you need to make believe that you need to be held to a higher standard than your enemy is retarded. The Democrats are allowed to weaponize the justice system against Donald Trump, but Donald Trump is not allowed to imprison his political opponents. Fucking bullshit. Donald Trump's going to imprison all of his political opponents, and he should. Iran doesn't get a pass. Oh, they're terrorists. They do war crimes. There's nothing new. No. They're terrorists. So therefore, we will do everything at our disposal to obliterate them completely. All right. That said, I'm not a huge fan of this idea of actually bombing their power plants. I'm sure Donald Trump has a strategy here that I'm not aware of, and I shouldn't be aware of it because I'm just a blue retard on the internet. I'm not actually some military advisor or anything. I told my Mossad operative to keep me blind. All right. My Mossad operative that's feeding me all the info that keeps helping me get predictions right. He's been dead silent lately, so something insane is going on. And we'll see where it goes. I'm a little bit scared about this one, I'm not gonna lie. This is a bit terrifying. That said, Iran says it will target enemy energy infrastructure and desalination plants if the U.S. strikes Iranian power plants. This is an unbelievable escalation from the United States, and this is an absolute nothing burger of a threat from Iran. Because Iran did everything in their power to destroy all of their neighbors. This is literally nothing new at all. Iran's been saying this forever. Iran's been targeting whatever they possibly can forever. I actually don't give a fuck about Iranian threats. They've been threatening something new every day to anyone paying attention. Everyone's freaking out about this. This is not something to freak out about. This is something to freak out about because the Donald has quite literally the ability and the willpower to do something fucking insane like this. And that's why we love him. Not just because he's orange and glorious, but also because he's orange and glorious. Now, yesterday, Iran launched an intermediately ranged ballistic missile on Diego Garcia, an island 4,000 kilometers away from Iran. This was massive. I covered this in my previous video in detail, but something insane happened. All right, this means only 3 European countries are out of range from Iranian ballistic missiles. Iceland, Ireland, and Portugal. Every other European country is quite literally able to be targeted and struck by Iran. This is the thing that Trump was saying the entire time could happen, that the entire world was saying, no, what do you mean? Iran's not an imminent threat. They just hate Israel or something. They're not an imminent threat to any other nation. Well, that was proven false completely. Iran proved its missiles can reach far beyond the Middle East. It fired 2 intermediate-range ballistic missiles at Diego Garcia, a joint U.S.-UK military base sitting 4,000 kilometers away in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Neither hit the base, thank God. One fizzled out and fell into the ocean, and the other one was intercepted. However, a 4,000-kilometer range Tehran literally could strike Paris, London, and most of Europe. This makes Iran a terrorist regime, quite literally an imminent threat that needed to be neutralized ASAP. For a lot of people that aren't paying attention to how actual serious this is, all right, I want to put this into perspective. This alone justifies the entire conflict against Iran. I feel like so many people just don't get what this means. This one piece of information alone proves the entire conflict against Iran is justified. Now, this isn't the only thing. They're also trying to get nukes. They're trying to kill us. They've killed thousands of us. They killed tens of thousands of their own people. They destabilized the region. They fund terrorist organizations. They orchestrated terrorist attacks against multiple countries, European and American. They've tried to assassinate President Donald Trump twice, etc., etc. But this one piece of information alone is enough, in my opinion, and also, according to international law, which we've already established is fake and gay, and we don't really care about it, but it's enough of a reason to neutralize this imminent threat, because that's what it is. All right, February 25th, 2026, we are not developing long-range missiles. We have limited the range below 2,000 kilometers. That is what Iran's foreign minister said. Wow! Iran's foreign minister said, literally 1 month ago, we don't have any long-range missiles. We only want to strike our neighbors. We don't want to strike you. What do you mean? We're not a threat. March 2020, Iran fires 2026, Iran fires missile at Diego Garcia ranging 4,000 kilometers. Quite literally, this is diabolical to anyone that actually understands the gravity of this situation. And now, here's the craziest part. President Donald Trump on 2/24/26 said this.
They've already developed missiles that can threaten Europe and our bases overseas, and they're working to build missiles that will soon reach the United States of America. After Midnight Hammer, they were warned to make no future attempts to rebuild their weapons.
They didn't listen.
In particular,
Awkward.
nuclear weapons. Yet they continue starting it all over. We wiped it out, and they want to start all over again.
Terrorists gonna terrorize.
And are at this moment again pursuing their sinister ambitions. They've already developed.
Yeah, so when Trump gave this speech, and this was, by the way, long before this situation happened, the entire world attacked him. They said he had no information for this. They said he was lying. All right, counterterrorism operative Joe Kent retired and said that there's no information, that they're any form of credible threat to the European countries. They were all proven wrong. That Donald was right again. Honestly, this guy was right more times than Alex Jones. Quite literally, Iran has already developed missiles that can threaten Europe and our bases overseas. He was correct. Every single person that said he was lying, like Elizabeth Warren said there's no information, there's no plan, there's no reason to go to war. All right, all these retards, the Tucker Carlsons, every single one of them could shut the fuck up. Even Pierce Morgan actually made this whole apology about it because it turns out he's just a bit of a bitch and he was wrong. And this war is totally justified.
The attempted attack suggests the reach of Iran's missile capabilities may be much longer than expected.
Oh, wow.
As Diego Garcia's 2,500...
Wow, you mean to tell me that the media didn't know things that quite literally Trump's classified information knew? You mean to tell me that the secret intelligence agencies that are using classified information to decide whether they should actually go to war to protect our nation might know more things than random fucking retard pundit on CNN?
Miles from Iran. Given that range, more European countries could be at risk of a missile strike. Fox News senior correspondent Mike Tobin is live in Tel Aviv, and he's got more on this. Mike?
And let me start you out with a couple of significant Iranian ballistic missile strikes.
Yeah, they're still striking, they're still flailing, they're still doing their thing. The retard right is going to ignore this. But that's, I assume, referring to the people that call themselves anti-war. I say they call themselves anti-war because I'm also anti-war. Now, I'll explain what that means. I am anti-war. I don't want war to happen. I just want to absolutely fucking obliterate terrorists trying to kill us and bring us into a dangerous war. All right? That's my stance. All right? If they're terrorists that are trying to kill us, they've been trying to kill us, they're still trying to kill us, they're developing weapons quite literally with the intent to kill us, we're going to fucking kill them first. That's right. I don't want to get into a war where we lose thousands of soldiers because they become an actual threat. I want to neutralize it before it's a threat. See, I am the real anti-war, all right? I want precise strikes decapitating retards, all right? That is the anti-war stance. The retard right is like, war bad, therefore we have to literally let terrorists develop the weapons to fucking kill us, all right? So the retard right is going to ignore this, but this by itself justifies the entire Iran war. Iran's military developed missiles which were capable of traveling 37 to 4,500 kilometers, depending on launch point inside Iran. Anyone questioning imminent threat has their answer. Quite literally, this is absolute empirical evidence. So here we go. This guy, Israel attacked Diego Garcia and blamed it on Iran. Holy shit, we saw where the missile came from. This is the stupidest shit I've ever seen in my entire life. All right, like imagine being this retarded. It's honestly insane. Like, these people are so lost in their own fucking universe that when they see something in reality contradict their worldview, you know, instead of actually reshaping their worldview to fit reality, they reshape reality to fit their worldview. Like, we have a large segment of the right that's just like, they're as delusional as leftists that think that men can be women. Or these people that believe that reality is malleable to whatever their fucking political talking points are. All right, and this guy who's been super critical of the entire war and all of the Israel stuff thus far, Cernovich, said, Israel is far from perfect. All right, very good, nice. But now everyone sees what Iran would do with more advanced weaponry. They are attacking Arab nations like a rabid dog. They had missiles that could reach Europe. They lied about everything. No! The terrorist regime death cult whose literal goal in existence is purely to fucking kill all of us? You mean to tell me that they also lie? You mean that when they said that they weren't planning on developing nuclear weapons and then we found out that they were enriching uranium to 60%, it turns out that they were trying to develop weapons to fucking kill us? Dude, it's honestly unbelievable how slowly but surely everyone's really realizing that not only was Trump completely correct about this conflict, but I was completely correct about everything. Dude, you have no idea the amount of fucking shit I get from all sides here, all right, when I'm covering this shit. I'm just trying my best to be honest, and I think that killing terrorists is actually fucking awesome. All right, so Joe Kent said this wasn't true, but this is what Iranian analysts had to say.
این طراحی کردن قطعاً برای این قضیه پلن بیوسی هم
All right, we need to receive reparations from the United States. Wow.
دارن. اونم اینه که ما حتما یکی از چیزایی که به ذهن من میرسه خسارت این اتفاقات رو باید از همین کشورهای مرتجع
All right,
منطقه
all our neighboring countries need to be punished to understand.
بگیریم و تنبیه بشن و بدانن هژمون
We are the country that has the power and the hegemony in the region, so therefore we have to punish our neighbors for disobeying us. This is Iran, by the way. It's still, this is just today.
منطقه و قدرت منطقه کدوم کشوره و من مردم از اون تبریک بگم. مردم ما بدانن که ما بعد
We have entered a new stage in the history of Iran.
از این وارد مرحله جدیدی شدیم در تاریخ ایران به عنوان یک قدرت بین‌المللی و یک ابرقدرت.
As an international power, we will be recognized as a global superpower. Wow.
قدرت جهانی شناخته خواهیم شد و تاثیر این جنگ
The impact of this war will definitely surpass that of the war with Iraq.
قطعاً به نظر من تاثیر جنگ 8 ساله ما بیشتر خواهد بود. من اگر اجازه بدید به عنوان اول
And I pledge allegiance to the new leader who never showed up. Pretty awesome stuff. We need to act in order to build a nuclear weapon.
ساخت سلاح هستی
But I was told by Joe Kent that there was a fatwa against them building nukes. But Tucker Carlson assured me that they were a peaceful people. They just wanted to fuck goats and rape children in peace.
و یا بسازیم
Either we build it or we acquire it.
یا این سلاح رو
Maybe
تهیه
their ally England will give it to them.
بکنیم.
Yeah, so quite literally, this is what they're saying openly. They're openly stating this. Now, I actually choose to believe the terrorists who have proven consistently that they're part of a death cult that wants to kill us. And I believe that we should fucking obliterate them before they actually have the capability to fucking kill us. I know, it's a controversial opinion, it seems, but I think that's because we're facing the largest psyop of all time. Breaking, Iranian man arrested trying to break in the UK's nuclear base in Scotland. Wow. Now we know how they're planning on getting nukes, don't we? Pretty insane. Now, this is the NVIDIA CEO, Justin Huang, and this dude dropped a nuke. All right, I shouldn't say that in the context of literally fighting a potential nuclear war, but this dude dropped a bomb. All right, this dude came out, much to the surprise of everyone, because, you know, the economy's struggling a little bit with this Iran war, but bro came out in complete defense of Donald Trump.
I was also asked, you know, given what's happening in the Middle East, is that an area where we believe that we can expand artificial intelligence to? I believe that there's a reason we went to war, and I believe at the end of the war, Middle East will be more stable than before.
Wow. So tech multi-billionaire who literally only fucking cares about money, let's be honest, thinks that this is a financially good idea. It is a financially good idea for the United States to spend a couple $1 billion on a war right now to quite literally stop us from facing an existential threat in the future. It's like, it's so obvious to anyone that thinks for a half a second. When you have Bernie Sanders crashing out, we spent $20 billion on this war with Iran, and I'm against it. With these $20 billion, we could have given them so many Somali living centers. You know, honestly, it's like, it's fucking retarded listening to these people. These people signed checks for $350 billion to Ukraine, but $20 billion to quite literally fight adversaries that are trying to kill us? That's too much. That's out of the pale. And quite literally, these guys all think they're retarded. Like, it's all a political game, all right? It's all a political game. The reason why the left is against this Iran war is because they hate Trump. The reason why the Muslims are against it is because they support the terrorists. All right, the reason why the third world is against it is because they're on the side of Iran here and they hate America. Right? It's honestly pretty obvious if you pay attention to it. Like, it is super duper obvious if you pay attention to where the dissent is coming from. The dissent isn't rational. The dissent is purely and utterly visceral because they hate something else. All right, they're against this war because they don't like Israel, and this will benefit Israel. You know, they're against this war because the poor terrorists are gonna fucking die. You know, like, and obviously they support the poor terrorists. They're against the war because they want Trump to look bad, and quite literally this is making Trump look absolutely awesome on the world stage. Everyone's praising Trump right now around the world. All right, now you look at the people complaining, and all of them have ulterior motives, every single one of them. Now, you know who does it? This fucking guy. This guy who just wants to make billions of dollars on AI slop. Okay, he thinks it's a financially good idea, because it is, obviously.
And so if we were there, if we were considering it before, we should absolutely be considering it after.
Yeah.
And so I'm 100% in on that.
Yeah, so this dude's totally in on moving to the Middle East. He doesn't care. He runs $1 trillion company, and he thinks the Middle East is going to be much better for business after this, obviously. Now, the Iranian regime devastated Arad and Dimona by deliberately striking civilians with missiles. Over 100 people were injured, including children, a blatant war crime, pure terrorism. The reality is, this is fucking crazy. This is what one ballistic missile that Iran fires look like, and they are quite literally targeting civilians. Now, the thing is, international law is fake and gay. Of course they're targeting civilians. They're terrorists. Their goal is to kill as many people as they can because they want to go to heaven and fuck children there. So many people try their absolute best to separate Islam from Islamism. But quite literally, we understand exactly what their religion states. They say it themselves. They truly believe that if they kill civilians, that's a good thing. We and Israel have only targeted actual military infrastructure. Yes, there's collateral damage because it's a fucking war that we started because those guys are fucking trying to kill us all the time. But the reality is, we're not targeting civilians. There are no apartment buildings in all of Iran that look like this. And if there were, they would have published those images immediately. All right, they're crying about this girls' school, that there was a misfire that blew up this girls' school. They don't have apartment complexes like this at all because quite literally, we haven't been striking any of them. But they did. And this is an unbelievable tragedy. As far as I understand, there are 6 people in critical condition. Thank God no one was killed. But it looks really fucking bad. And this is big, all right? And this was literally targeting civilians. Now, if you look at how BBC News, the British broadcasting cock, completely and utterly owned by Islam, it's insane. Live, Iranian missile strikes near Israeli nuclear facility after Tehran says one of its sites targeted. What? This hit a residential neighborhood that's nowhere near a nuclear facility. What are we even talking about? Like, this is insane. You're really trying to make this look like it was some sort of tactical strike? Their literal stated goal is massacring as many civilians as they possibly can while they flail into oblivion. All right? Candace Owens obviously celebrating at the injured Israeli civilians. Iran has a right to exist. Okay. Also, they warned they would strike, which I have been reliably informed makes them the most moral army in the world. What? When Israel takes out infrastructure that's owned by terrorists, they warn the people in the infrastructure to leave before striking that building. Right? They literally send out leaflets and pamphlets telling the enemy where they're going to strike to minimize civilian casualties. They did this in Lebanon. They did this in Gaza. All right? Iran did not send leaflets to this apartment building. They tried to fucking maximize civilian casualties. Lastly, the children harmed were used as human shields. These children were quite literally just children in a residential apartment building, and especially, ironically, this is a very religious neighborhood. For anyone that understands the actual context, these are anti-Zionist Jews. These are not Jews that actually support the current government of Israel at all. The Hasidic community is anti-Zionist by nature, for those of you that care, which Candace Owens doesn't. She's just happy to see Jews getting attacked or something. I really don't understand. I don't know anyone on the American side, or even frankly on the Israeli side, that celebrates the killing of children. The argument that children are collateral damage in a war is a completely, quite literally, honest one. Children die in every war. But this is quite literally targeting children and civilians. There was no military infrastructure here at all. There was no terrorist threat from here at all. Candace Owens is just literally rooting for our enemy to kill as many civilians as possible because, hey, the Jews are actually bad. But anywho, no need to explain the fact that we're literally dealing with barbaric terrorists to these retards because they don't care, actually. They don't care. Now, speaking of Candace Owens, she's getting blasted on the timeline for something else, and I feel like this is a perfect time to bring it up. So, Candace Owens went to the Catholics for Catholics meeting. It's a group of Catholics that got together. Pretty good stuff. Preaching in the name of God, I suppose. Candace Owens' speech was not that. I'm not going to show it to you, because she basically did a 30-minute long speech talking about herself.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you. Truly an honor to be here. This is my first Catholic event, so I will never forget this. You know, I just had that Catholic excitement. Just me. I did this.
Anyway, she references herself 357 times, and she references God like twice. For those of you paying attention to how she did at the Catholic for Catholic speech. Honestly, this is embarrassing, and I feel bad for Catholics. I really do. I think Catholics are great people for the most part, and then you get Candace.
All right, hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about a super hive change that they have announced that is proving to be a little bit controversial. We as creators weren't really given any opportunity to discuss it. They just sent an email saying this is going to happen May. There's no option for it to be optional, which, as we're going to talk about in this video, that may be very problematic. The TLDR of all the thoughts I'm going to share in this video is this needs to be an optional system. Basically, what they're doing is they're imposing a support system where any product that you've purchased, you will only get access to updates for that product from that creator for a set period of time. And if you want any updates that the creator makes past that period of time, you have to buy it again. It'll be discounted. Now, that is fine, right, as a tactic, a strategy, a system. But the problem that I have with this is it's enforced. So even if there's a project where that doesn't really make much sense, it's going to be an enforced thing. Also, the support time period is it's a static number, like 12 months, which may have some conflicts with consumer rights laws. Also, it's retroactive, so it applies to previously released products as well. So if we've said, like on video as creators, you will get lifetime updates with this, they're imposing this system on those previous products, which means that they have now put us in a position where we're false advertisers. Now, there's a whole lot of legal stuff that could be said about that, and I'm not a legal expert, so don't take my word for it, but customers could sue Superhive for retroactively enforcing this support and repurchase thing on things that they've already bought. I'm not interested in any in doing that at all or anything like that. But the main thing from my perspective is it would now make it difficult for me to share my own products and projects. I wouldn't really know how to say it. I don't necessarily mind this repurchase system, but it's not compatible with other storefronts that I put things on. I want it to be an optional feature, an optional service that creators can use on Superhive so that I can design future products around that model. Now, we're going to talk a bit more about details and my opinions on the finer things. So I've already done this video. Yesterday, I sat down, I recorded all my thoughts about it. In places, it's maybe a little bit harsh. I try and go back and forth. I haven't been feeling in a particularly good mood. So what I thought I would do for the first time ever is me, who's in a slightly better mood, even if I seem a bit agitated, I'm going to react to the video I made yesterday so that it gives us a bit of separation. We can talk about a few more points. So we're going to watch it together. I get this may be a bit weird. You'll be hearing my voice through different time periods. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so Superhive, in their quest to stay afloat, have come up with a new idea for how to change the Blender-related marketplace. So as you may know, people who release Blender-related resources, add-ons, tools, use a variety of popular storefronts. So there's Gumroad, there's itch.io, there was Flipped Normals, but that's now closing down, which should also give an indication as to why Superhive are trying new things, and Superhive itself, which used to be known as Blender Market. Now, it's a difficult market to try and run. I've already raised some concerns and complaints in the past, and when they've tried to implement strategies, for example, there was a whole situation a little while ago where they sent out an email to creators that said, if you have unresponded customer emails in your inbox by a certain date, then your account would get deleted. And I sent them a very angry email, kind of maybe not so politely highlighting why that was a really bad idea. Yeah, so I'll just jump in here. They did give a clarification message. I could probably find it. Or maybe I won't do that right now. But I had sent them points saying, yeah, but what about this case, this case, this case? Surely you can't just automatically look at, accounts that have unread emails and then just delete them. That doesn't make any sense. Because, what about spam and all that kind of thing? And then they sent a message back saying, oh, no, that wasn't our intention. But the problem is, the wording in that original email was very clear. If you haven't cleared out your inbox, then your account would get deleted. So it just feels like there's always a bit of they don't think before they do things. All right, well, let's carry on. And from speaking to other creators, we kind of get the feeling that Superhive is on its, I won't put it lightly, it feels like Superhive is on its dying legs. And rather than listening to people, it feels like they're having meetings, they're coming up with ideas that aren't fully researched, without speaking to the right people in the community, throwing it at the wall and just hoping it sticks before they collapse. Okay, so jumping in again. Like I said in the video, that's just personal opinion. I don't know what happens behind the scenes, but when we're on the outside looking in, that's just what it feels like. Just want to be clear about that. That's what it feels like, at least. So I left it a little bit of time before recording this video, because the new idea is this annual support system. Important information, annual support periods. It says, hey there, I have very important information to share regarding a substantial change to Superhive. Please take the time to digest all this information regarding the implementation of annual support periods. Before I even start reading this to you, I just want to draw your attention to something very important. Strongly say here, I'm not a legal expert, but I am aware of this. Product support is something that's not specifically governed by the storefront reseller, right? It's provided by the creator to the customer, right? For anything relating to the product, although that's kind of a bit mixed because, storefronts are necessary for the support for things like refunds and such like that. But just jumping in here, we could say that the storefronts are responsible for the payment processing support. and stuff around that, or if there's any like extra agreement or whatever between the storefront and the creator, things, the lines can get blurry. Support. What support should be provided is often covered by this very big entity that has the absolute final say in it, which is government. Yes, law, consumer rights, consumer protection acts, etc., etc. Now, here's the thing. Different countries and different unions, like the EU, have different things to say on what rights should be given to the consumer, the creator, what the creator should do. And generally speaking, yes, that will apply to storefronts as well. So before we read this, I just want you to keep this in mind, that for a storefront to start trying to change the rules of support, what I mean by this is setting very specific time frames, which may already be defined in government law, could cause some catastrophic legal problems. No, I don't know if this is the case. Let's have a read through and take a look. In some cases, law does give very definite time periods. A number of days, a number of weeks, a number of months that a customer could refund something or receive a replacement depending on the type of product it is. Sometimes it's much more vague, and oftentimes you'll see things like fit for purpose, or if they're talking about a time frame, it's a reasonable time frame and stuff like that. But one important thing I need you to keep in mind is, on planet Earth, all of the continents, all of the countries, pretty much, everything that is, has a very slightly different way of approaching things, which means I'm pretty sure that in one place or another place or another place, there's going to be slightly different rules about product support, expectations when it comes to consumer rights, and particularly timeframes. An important point to make here is that a storefront can't make a creator do something. They can't rewrite a creator's policies or behaviors. Like if it comes to warranty, you will know this from if you buy a computer or something. A company that makes the individual parts can provide a warranty on the parts. That's your connection to the original parts producer. But they can also be a warranty on the entire system, which is separate. So for example, if Superhive is trying to make a support system without the consent of the creators, they can't really do that. But they could, for example, provide a warranty, quote unquote, that protects customers from purchases, and then the customer could purchase to renew said warranty, which is a separate layer from the creator. I'm just kind of saying that as an example, but I don't really see what the point would be in this kind of storefront. But the point I want to make is that with the wording that Superhive uses on this, as in, you're paying for the creator's support, it would be like a PC manufacturer going, you're paying for NVIDIA's support, even though they haven't consulted NVIDIA about it at all. It doesn't make sense. It's like saying, oh yeah, that guy's going to come over and help you. Did you ask that guy? So if Superhive wants to impose something like a flat support period, I believe that there may be conflicts in certain cases. So let's see. The Blender creator economy is breaking. One of the most important parts of this rollout is educating your audience on the issues threatening the Blender artist's livelihood, and to provide a strong basis for this adjustment to the Blender economy to support sustainable work for creators in our community. Okay, interesting. But what I would say is the Blender creator economy is not breaking. It's never been broken. It's perfectly fine. What is breaking is Superhive stability. Oh, I know that, more artists and more add-on developers can make more money from the Blender audience, but just because the Blender community, as it stands, has settled on an economy-type model that isn't squeezing out the most amount of money, it doesn't mean it's broken. It just means it's different. So yeah, jumping in again, this is something where I have like fundamental philosophy differences to, I guess, other product developers. Kind of feel like how sales work in one industry is how things need to work in every industry. And I know that people feel like, they're deserved more money for the effort they put in. And I do agree with that to a certain degree. But the approach I take is Blender and the Blender community has developed a philosophy that we collectively and in an unspoken way agree on. It's just kind of how the GPL license works, really. That doesn't mean that I disagree with it. I acknowledge, and I believe this, that we just have an unspoken philosophy in the Blender community that keeps things stable. And I believe there is power in ambiguity. I can say that about politics as well. I know it may be a controversial take, but I think anyone that argues one side or the other completely without seeing like the middle line, the grey in between, is a bit of an idiot. And I will allude to this a bit later in the video, that when I've been to the Blender conference, because of my, position, I suppose, being a little bit of a news reporter in the Blender community, people show me things that I'm not supposed to see, including email exchanges between members of the Blender Foundation or members of like the Superhive team and certain other add-on developers. I'm not supposed to see that stuff. Indications of lawyers and all that thing. So we're going to carry on with the video. The point I'm just making at this at this point in the video is, I don't think the Blender creator economy is broken. I think the idea of it being broken is more of a capitalist perspective that, oh, because we're not making the most amount of money out of it, it must be broken. I think that's a really weird perspective. Something being different isn't broken, it's just different. And I do think that seeing difference as broken is a very dangerous way of going through life. For example, if we applied it to people, do you look at people with different skin tone or different ability and go, oh, they must be broken? Now, I need to be clear here that this doesn't mean that I disagree with all these things being said. Actually, I agree with a lot of the things that I think it's Jonathan Williamson that posted this. I can't really tell from the username. I agree with a lot of the things they say here, in that add-on or resource development isn't really fair, in that people expect lifetime updates for products, like forever, and that we won't get paid for our time again, by previous customers. And I've actually been thinking about that, but I think there's a completely different way of doing it, in the way of taking inspiration from video games. I was thinking, literally recently, about changing my business model for Blender, is that what I would like to do is have a big product like Afterglow, right? And I will think of it like a video game. And then if I think, I need to raise a few more funds from this, I can't just keep giving free updates to this. Do you know what I'll do? I'll make a DLC for it. And I can do free updates for that. I could do roadmaps, make it fun for people. And when I need to make a bit more funds, do you know what I'll do? I'll make another DLC for it. And none of this requires repurchasing the first one. It's just a slightly different approach that says, okay, well, I can keep going through new phases of making money from pre-existing audience members. And what this does is it doesn't take away my right and my freedom to add free updates to anything that I've made before. The thing about making a system that enforces support and enforces repurchasing is that it kind of adds this expectation that literally everything, every little thing I want to add to it, has an expectation of purchase. I can't just gift people things. Another issue before we carry on is store parity. So say we've got Gumroad and we've got Superhive. If Superhive is going into a model where people have to keep repurchasing things just to be able to download the updates, and let's say the Gumroad doesn't support that feature, I'm not going to delete my Gumroad account and just use Superhive. In fact, because of the commissions, the relatively low commission we get from Superhive, which they restrict higher commissions behind paid premium accounts, it's not even a question in my mind. If I have to drop one of the storefronts, I will drop Superhive. But also, even if I don't, if both are... So I want to jump in here. So I've made more money on Gumroad than I have on Superhive, so I will drop Superhive. Other add-on creators will say, yeah, but you would make more money with this new system. And I'm like, will I? Because that's a pretty bold claim to make. And I think that largely depends on me. Actually, I may make more money by abandoning Superhive because of this system on Gumroad. As we'll get into a bit later, I like to take my own approach, building my own license system and ideally my own support system. But this is why, like I said at the beginning, this system needs to be optional and opt-in so that I can design future products around it rather than having it retroactively break things. Our options for the customers, what do you think they're going to pick? The one where they have to keep repurchasing the product, or the one where they get access to, again, all the future potential free updates without needing to pay again? But I don't think this is all necessarily bad. In fact, as we're going to see, you'll see how the support system works here, includes a 12-month support period, but I think this should be optional. More so than that, since creators are not employees of the storefront, Superhive can't enforce the behavior of the creator. They're almost advertising a service that the creator has not agreed to, especially if that's being applied to pre-existing products. So what they're doing is they're adding a condition of sale to pre-existing products that the creator may not have consented to. So they'll be doing that automatic. Yeah, so actually, it's almost like adding a condition to an invoice that's already been paid, a contract that's already been fulfilled. How? You can't do that automatically if that applies to everything that's sold. It'd be like me saying, okay, so we got Jim, and Jim's providing a service. He does commission, I don't know, fucking furry VTuber avatars. Really big industry, by the way. Not just a joke, huge industry. And let's say the Watson is the owner of the storefront where Jim is advertising his services. It'd be out of nowhere, Watson goes, oh yeah, plus they also will wash your car and they'll clean your garage. But Jim doesn't know about it because he hasn't been paying attention to the communications. So now when someone goes and they buy that, they expect all these other things that Jim is unaware of. So again, I'm not sure if there's some kind of hidden legal issue in there somewhere. So that's why I believe that it should at least be optional. Also, in addition to this kind of support system doesn't make sense for every kind of product. So you got add-ons, for example, and let's say we've got asset library. So add-ons are interesting because it's a one thing, right? The add-on that every time there's a Blender update, it may need to be changed a little bit to keep it up to date. This model does make more sense for add-ons, which is where I think the bias is coming in, because when Superhive do talk to creators in the community, it's a lot of add-on developers kind of whispering in their ear, or rather shouting in their ear. I don't really know what the relationship's like. And it makes sense because you invest time into one thing that needs to go through these extra steps, and it's like, okay, yeah, fine, maybe this repaying method works there. For an asset library, it's a little bit different, because the one thing you make may be far more stable and compatible with like pretty much every version going on into the future. And the files included, there may be like, I don't know, like 20 files. And rather than being the one thing being updated, it's instead an additive process. So what I'm saying here is that some people may think, well, why am I having to repurchase the product? When realistically, everything I'm already repurchasing already works. I already have it. It's just like this little extra tidbit that's added on top. You know, it's a bit different than an add-on that it kind of feels like the whole thing is renewed in some way because of the fixes. The asset library is a little bit different. It's like we've got this kind of decay that happens. The old stuff isn't really broken. Decision of the creator, it could make sense to apply this to either one of them, but from the customer perspective, it's like, what am I repaying to download? The thing I originally purchased, or just additions to something, which may be like really small. I did see an indication of the support thing being renewed at a discounted price, right? Which would make sense. Oh, and I know that maybe some Superhive people come in and say, yeah, but when they're rebuying it, you know, you still always had access to the original files you brought. Yeah, but if you're rebuying it, as you're describing in this, you're kind of repurchasing all access to everything again, including stuff that you already had access to. But then how can we quantify that discount, like proportionally to the content being added, if there is any way of doing that? Also, there's a question of incompatibility with licenses. So a lot of people on Superhive, myself included, even on Gumroad, we come up with our own license structure. So for Afterglow, we've got like the individual, we've got the studio, and the studio unlimited license. Actually, I might as well just show you it here. Any individual can use it for whatever they want, as many times as they want. So that's like independent self-employed. If you're a company, you can use it for one project with no seat limit. So let's say you're working on an advertisement project for a client, you would buy the product for that project. And then the unlimited one is for unlimited projects, no seat limits. I'm just adding this voice afterwards. I can't believe watching back this edit, I'm just realizing my studio license was already an attempt to do exactly what Superhive are trying to achieve. I knew that I needed people to buy my products again, but I wanted to do it in a fair way where it would only be applied to companies and on a per project basis. So I'll just jump in here again. Yeah, so this here is really an attempt to do that, to get people to repurchase the products, but in a way that's actually considerate for the blended community philosophy, which we spoke about earlier. Also, another problem with Superhive in this is that when you upload products, there's a very limited set of licenses that you have to pick from. We can't just say custom license and then talk about ours. So I always pick royalty free, because technically mine is like built on top of a royalty free philosophy. But Superhive should be able to just let us say, oh no, this, and then like link to our own license or something like that. And then there was the unlimited option. So from my perspective as a creator, I already have a solution to that problem, and it has parity between Superhive and Gumroad. Other people do it differently. They do seat limits instead. But the question now becomes, okay, if there is a support period being renewed, which one of these is it? And if there's a discount system going on, is it adaptable to each of these tiers? They might have thought about that. That may be down here in the thing down here, but it's maybe in conflict with some people's custom like licensing systems. And before people say, oh, add-ons shouldn't have these kinds of like custom licenses on them, well, check again. I've only been applying these to non-add-on type products, at least so far, because I haven't properly sat down to think about the add-on ones. They're still on an old system. A support period included with every product on Superhive, again, that may be a problem, like we said about like imposing extra terms on a creator who may not be aware. But the support period will include access to product updates for 12 months, access to product support for 12 months. Again, note that we said there may be a conflict with international laws, depending on where they're from, in terms of like consumer rights, etc. That's just my concern about seeing a specified date placed. By the way, making this optional would solve that problem. It's just such a simple fucking solution, because if there was any conflict, creator can go off and then just like cruise on their own again in a way that is compliant. So I don't know why they're trying to enforce this. Like the number of possible issues that can come by making this not optional is potentially huge, and by making it optional you just get rid of all of them. All of those issues gone. Boof. Best of both worlds. So they're holding up a placard saying sue me as a company. Like, it's mad. Snapshot versions of products within bundles are excluded. Admins may also manually disable support periods on products. Admins may also manually disable support periods on products on a case by case-by-case basis. No, there should be creators doing this. It should be an opt-in system, a service that Superhive can provide. Again, if you're imposing terms on a creator without them necessarily knowing, instead, what you should be doing, rather than trying to hijack the process of support between creator and consumer, is offer consumers your own support system, separate from the creator, because that's under your agency. Again, the creator is just using you as a reseller. You don't have agency on the creator. Sure, you have terms, you can kick them off the platform and all that, but they're not your employee. You can't just tell them what to do. I feel like there's this overreach sometimes, and this was first seen, like I said, when
demanding modern diets can be on digestion, especially if you're eating higher protein meals. So I've started using Masszymes by Biooptimizers, a full spectrum digestive enzyme formula designed to support how your body breaks down food. Biooptimizers has been around since 2004, and they're still a founder-owned company. Their whole thing is quality and formulation first. They've even got their own in-house lab team, and they test raw ingredients because in supplements, that part matters more than most people realize. Masszymes is their digestive enzyme product. And what sets it apart is that it's a full spectrum blend. It includes 18 enzymes that support the breakdown of proteins, fats, carbohydrates, and fibers. It's also got a high level of protease to support protein breakdown, and phytase, which helps make minerals like iron and zinc more accessible from the food you're already eating. When your body breaks food down more effectively, that can support smoother digestion, better nutrient absorption, and may help with occasional post-meal discomfort or bloating. No drama, no miracle claims, just supporting the process. Here's how I'm using it. I take 2 to 3 capsules with meals, especially heavier meals, and I'm paying attention over time to how I feel afterwards. The point is consistency, not chasing some overnight transformation. And here's the big trust piece. Biooptimizers back themselves with a 365-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it properly. And if it's not for you, you're not stuck with it. Just let them know, and they will refund you 100%. Quick UK note, if you click the link from the UK, you may be redirected to a UK distributor site. That's normal, and the offer will still apply. If you want a practical way to support digestion and nutrient absorption without changing your whole routine, Masszymes is a straightforward place to start. Click the link in the description of this episode or go to biooptimizers.com/trigger and use our code TRIGGER at checkout to get 15% off your order. Go through 2026 with better digestion and more energy with Masszymes by Biooptimizers.
My reasoning was very straightforward, which is this Ayatollah and this regime is a serious threat to the United States. It's not a theoretical threat. It's a threat that's reality. Let me make a broader point on you asked about Joe Kent. I don't know him personally. I know of him, but I will say I think he embodies. Let's talk philosophically for a second. For a long time, people have thought about foreign policy, particularly foreign policy among Republicans in the United States, as essentially a bipolar world. Mm-hmm. That you're either an interventionist and you want to go invade other countries and engage in military conflict, or you're an isolationist. You want to withdraw from the world and never engage in military conflict. And, sort of the paradigmatic interventionist would have been a John McCain. And the paradigmatic isolationist would be a Ron Paul or Rand Paul. And those are treated as the only two options. I can tell you, I've always thought both were wrong. I don't agree with either one of them. And I think most Americans don't agree with either one of them. I've always described myself as a third point on the triangle. And so I call myself a non-interventionist hawk. Now, what does that mean? It means, as I said before, that every decision is keyed on protecting the vital national security interests of the United States. So you don't engage in military conflict, to engage in nation building, to promote democracy, to defend norms. That was a popular phrase in the Obama administration. I don't know what the hell it means to defend norms, but I'm not willing to have U.S. soldiers die to defend norms. I am willing to put the U.S. military in harm's way to protect Americans and save American lives. That's why we have a strong military. And so it means, let's take, for example, when Obama was president, and he talked about bombing Syria, and he drew a red line of chemical weapons, and Bashar Assad crossed that red line. And when he talked about engaging in military conflict, I did not immediately reject it. I said, okay, let me listen to the commander-in-chief. Let me hear your argument for why this protects U.S. national security. And I could have envisioned, so at the time, Bashar Assad had chemical weapons. He was using chemical weapons against his own people. I could have envisioned conceivably a military operation that I would think makes sense and would support. So I wanted to listen to him. And I will tell you, I asked in both classified settings and in public settings. At the time, there were 7 major rebel groups in Syria, many of which were affiliated with radical Islamic terrorists, Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra. And I said, okay, let's say you go in and topple Assad. How do you stop the radical Islamic terrorists from taking over? And if Al-Qaeda has chemical weapons, we've made the world much worse. As bad as Bashar Assad is, he's not using those weapons on Americans. Al-Qaeda would love to use those weapons on Americans. I'm not interested in having terrorists who hate us get weapons they can use to kill us. When you asked them those questions, the answers of the Obama administration were incoherent. They were all over the place. They said, at one point, John Kerry said, we're going to launch an unbelievably small attack. And it was like, okay, well, what the hell is the purpose? And look, I could have envisioned, let's say there was a mission to go in. We knew where the chemical weapons were. They were in one warehouse. We were going to send in a squad to get the chemical weapons and remove them. And I could envision that being targeted in a way that might make America safer. Obama administration never articulated anything like it, and so I vocally opposed that military action because it didn't make America safer. Contrast this with Iran. Iran has been actively killing Americans and has plans to continue killing Americans.
The way they call you Dr. Death. Used to be a medic. That was a long time ago. But why'd you get locked away? Tax evasion. So you're all that's left of the Expendables. We're it. We started out with 5, built up to 22. I see Barney's still hanging the tags up there. Said that jingling sound the tags making. That's a reminder that our brothers are still here. Somewhere. So come on, Viking. Give a whole school of your blade. Or else you might find your tags up there. Sharpen it when you're done.
Your friend's a little off. Heard you killed more people than... You see, it's like this. Heard you killed more people than the plague.
How about that?